and welcome. We're diving deep today into Java. I know, Java. Sometimes it gets a rep for being, well, a little bit yesterday's news.
I hear you, but that's really not the case.
Exactly, and that's kind of what we're going to unpack. Java is seriously under the hood of so much tech we use all the time.
It's everywhere.
Right. So, today we've got these two articles from InfoQ. They're all about the latest Java development kit releases. JDK 24 is ready to officially launch, and then we've even got some peeks at what might be coming in JDK 25 later this year. So much to dig into.
Definitely. For folks who aren't deep in the coding world, think of the JDK, that's the Java Development Kit, as this giant toolbox for developers. It's how they build stuff with Java.
Okay, so JDK 24. This is what they call non-LTS release, meaning shorter-term support compared to some of the other versions. But even though it's short-term, it's still got 24 new features packed in. Officially, they're JDK enhancement proposals, but everyone just calls them JEPs.
Easier to say.
Way easier. And these JEPs, they cover like everything. Core libraries to security upgrades, the whole works.
It's interesting, too, because some of these updates aren't just for, like, the hardcore programmer. They've got a JEP that's really about making Java easier to pick up if you're a newbie.
Oh, now that's my kind of update. Anything that makes tech more friendly, I'm all for it. What's that look like, practically speaking?
So JEP 495, it's got this long name, simple source files, and instance main methods. But all it really means is you can write those basic Java programs in a much simpler way. Like, imagine if you could just start coding with a few lines. No need to get lost in all the, like, deeper stuff of the language right off the bat.
I love that. It's like training wheels on a bike, you know? Master the basics before you're trying to do the Tour de France of coding.
Totally. And along those same lines, another JEP, this one is aiming to make Java programs start up crazy fast. It's JEP 483, Ahead of Time Class Loading and Linking is the official title.
Okay, for us non-coders out there, break that down. What does that actually mean when I'm using, like, my favorite app?
Imagine, you tap the app and it loads instantly. No more staring at that little spinning wheel or that progress bar that never seems to move. That's the goal.
Now, that's an update I can get behind. Nobody likes waiting.
For sure.
Yeah.
But JDK 24 isn't just about speed or making things easier. Security is also a huge focus. And they're even thinking about, like, the way far out future with quantum computers.
Hold on, quantum computers, that sounds a bit sci-fi. Are we at the point where that's a real concern?
Maybe not like tomorrow, but quantum computing is advancing super fast. And one of the things people are worried about is that these computers will be able to crack the encryption that keeps all our data safe right now.
So is Java getting ready to fight off super hackers from the future?
You could say that.
Yeah.
JEP 497. Now, this one has a real mouthful of a name. It's the quantum-resistant module lattice-based digital signature algorithm. But basically, it's a new type of encryption. They're trying to stay way ahead of the curve when it comes to security.
So Java's basically prepping for a future we can't even picture yet. Wild. With all these additions, were there any features in JDK 24 that stood out to you?
Oh, absolutely. There are a couple that I think are potential game changers.
Well, don't leave us hanging. Which ones?
Okay, so first up, scoped values. This is part of what's called Project Loom. Now, it can get kind of technical, but in simple terms, imagine it's like each part of a program gets its own little box to keep its information in.
Like to keep things organized so they don't get all mixed up with stuff from other parts of the program?
Yeah, exactly. And what that means is when you're writing a really complex program, especially one that's doing a bunch of things at once, it's way easier and way less likely to have errors.
Sounds like it's a lifesaver for developers. What's the second one?
The second one is the Vector API. This comes from Project Panama. This one's all about speed, specifically on computers that have multiple cores, which most do these days.
Okay, quick explainer for me. What are cores again? And why do they matter for speed?
Think of cores like workers in a factory. The more cores you have, the more tasks your computer can handle at the same time. Vector API lets Java use all those cores to their full potential. It's like splitting a big job into smaller pieces and having everyone work on it at once.
Ah, so instead of one person trying to do it all, it's a whole team effort.
Exactly. And that translates to faster processing, calculations, everything just feels smoother and quicker.
Man, these updates really seem to be pushing Java forward in a big way. Ready for the future. What about JDK 25 then? What's on the horizon?
Well, it's still under development, but there are hints about what's to come. Some of the stuff that's been experimental in JDK 24 might become official features in JDK 25.
Oh, very cool. Any specifics?
So simple source files, the one we talked about earlier that makes Java easier to learn, That one's in its 4th preview.
Yeah.
It's getting close to being a permanent part of the language.
Awesome. The more accessible, the better. What else?
Stable values is another one that's likely to be included. This lets developers set a value, and it can only ever be set once. Makes code safer, more predictable.
Like setting it in stone, huh? Once it's done, it's done.
Exactly. No accidental changes later on that can cause problems. And to keep with that theme of reliability, JDK 25 is probably also going to have what they're calling structured concurrency.
Oh, okay. I'm going to need a little help with that one. What is structured concurrency, and why should I care?
It's basically about making it much easier to write programs that can do multiple things at the same time, but without things getting all tangled up. Bringing order to chaos, kind of.
So less like things happening all over the place and more like a well-coordinated team where everyone knows exactly what they're doing and when.
That's a great way to put it. And this is super important because nowadays, almost all software relies on doing many things at once to really handle all the complex stuff it needs to do.
Sounds like a major upgrade. With JDK 24 launching soon and JDK 25 on the way, it seems like Java's got a lot of momentum.
For sure. What's interesting is how these updates aren't just about today's problems. They're prepping Java for the challenges and possibilities of the future, too.
Yeah, I mean, from quantum-resistant encryption to simplifying coding for beginners, Java's definitely evolving. It's becoming faster, easier, and more secure all at once. This is definitely a deep dive I'm glad we're taking. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, I am curious, what does all of this mean, big picture for the future of tech?
That's the big question, isn't it? With all this evolution happening, what ripples will it create in the tech world? It's a lot to think about. And we haven't even touched on everything new in JDK 24 yet. There's a lot more packed in there.
Oh, right. We did focus on a few of the big ones, but there's more, huh?
Oh, yeah. Like JDP 484, this one's for developers who work with those Java class files.
No, remind me. Class files, those are like the blueprints for how Java programs are built, right?
Yep, that's a good way to think about it. And what this JEP does is it gives developers a whole new API application programming interface for working with those blueprints.
Okay, so more tools for the toolbox,
Yep.
but fancy high-tech tool.
Exactly. More flexibility, more control for the developers. And then there's JEP 485. This one introduces some handy new ways to work with streams.
Streams. Those are like pipelines of data flowing through a program.
You got it. And this JEP makes it easier to, collect and summarize info from those streams. Imagine it's like having a way to filter and sort through all that data super efficiently.
Nice. So more efficiency for developers. Gotta love that. And speaking of efficiency, wasn't there a JEP related to, what was it called? The HotSpot virtual machine?
Yep, that's right. HotSpot is a core part of how Java actually runs. It's kind of like the engine.
I always thought that name was kind of cool. So what's this JEP do to the engine, so to speak?
This one, JEP 490, focuses on the Z garbage collector.
Oh, garbage collection. That one always makes me think of literally taking out the trash. Aha. But what does it mean in the coding world?
I get it, it's a funny name. Basically, garbage collection is all about automatically cleaning up memory that a program isn't using anymore, like a little cleanup crew that comes in and keeps everything tidy so your computer doesn't get bogged down.
So this JEP makes the cleanup crew even more efficient.
Yep. The Z garbage collector is known for being able to deal with tons of data without slowing things down. And this JEP makes it even better.
Wow. It's amazing how much work goes on behind the scenes to keep everything running smoothly. We've been talking a lot about what's being added in JDK 24, but there are also a few things being removed in this release, right?
That's right. They're saying goodbye to the security manager with JEP 486.
Security manager. If I'm honest, I was never quite sure what that did. Fill me in. What was it and why get rid of it?
So the security manager was kind of like, well, a security guard for Java. It decided what programs were allowed to do. The idea was to make a safe space for running code that maybe you didn't completely trust.
Oh, like a sandbox for potentially risky code?
Exactly. The problem was, over time, it got super complicated and hard to maintain. And sometimes it even introduced security holes itself.
So more trouble than it was worth, huh?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Getting rid of it actually makes Java simpler and safer in the long run.
Makes sense. Like getting rid of an old, complicated lock that's more easily picked than actually used. All right, so we've covered quite a bit here. Easier learning, quantum security, speed boosts, even cleaning house with some outdated features. JDK 24 is a big deal. But let's hop back over to JDK 25 for a sec.
Of all the stuff we talked about earlier, is there any one thing that you're personally most excited to see?
Ooh, that's tough. There are a few that really make me think Java is going in a fantastic direction. Simple source files, the one about making Java easier to pick up, that's huge potentially.
Yeah, that one was a big one for me too. The more folks who can code, the better.
I was also super intrigued by stable values. The more I think about it, the more I see how that could fundamentally change how people write Java code.
Oh yeah, it's a small tweak with big potential, makes code so much more robust, predictable, less chance of those weird bugs popping up.
And I'm really curious to see how stable values will work with structured concurrency. It's like those two together, they feel like they could change how people think about Java development overall.
You're right on the money there. That interplay is going to be fascinating to watch as JDK 25 develops. Sometimes the best innovation comes from these unexpected combinations, you know?
Absolutely. And speaking of combinations, I was wondering, how do you think these JDK 25 features will play with some of the stuff that's already out there in Java? Like, we talked about cloud computing, but could these new features make Java even better in that world?
Definitely a good question. One area where I think we'll see a big difference is in what they call serverless computing, which is a huge part of the cloud world that's growing super fast.
Okay, now for those of us who haven't jumped on the serverless bandwagon yet, what is that all about and why is it important?
So old school cloud, you had to like rent servers, manage all this stuff yourself. Think of it like renting an apartment. You're in charge of everything. Serverless is like,
Yeah.
you just bring your code and the cloud takes care of the rest. Like staying in a hotel, no need to clean up after yourself.
So it's all about making things simpler for developers. Let them focus on the code, not the infrastructure.
Exactly. And Java's great for this because it can run anywhere, which is super handy for serverless platforms.
Makes sense. But how do the JDK 25 features come into play?
Well, a big part of serverless is that those functions, they only run when needed. They pop up, do their job, then disappear. And that's where ahead-of-time compilation can really shine.
Right, because if the code's compiled beforehand, it's ready to go instantly when it's needed.
Exactly, no waiting around. And then scoped values is also going to be super useful because serverless functions often share data, and scoped values help manage that safely and efficiently, even when multiple things are running at once.
So each function gets its own little workspace, no risk of messing up someone else's data.
Very cool. Any other areas where you think these new features will make waves?
Mobile app development is another interesting one. Java is not as dominant in mobile as it used to be, but there are still a lot of Android apps that use it.
So could JDK 25 give Java a boost in the mobile world?
It's possible. Features like structured concurrency could be a game changer for making those mobile apps super responsive and smooth. Think about it. Your phone's doing like a million things at once. Music, social media, downloading stuff. Structured concurrency helps manage all that without your app freezing up or crashing.
Yeah, nobody wants a laggy app. So it sounds like JDK 25 is potentially going to give Java a leg up in tons of areas. Cloud, mobile, you name it.
Definitely. But as we've been saying, it's not just about the tech itself. It's about the people who use it. The developers who are going to take these features and do amazing things with them. That's the exciting part. So true. Speaking of exciting, we've been down in the weeds of JDK 24 and 25 for a while now. Let's zoom out, big picture time. Where do you see all of this heading for Java in the long term? How do these changes impact the entire tech landscape, you think?
Oh, that's the million-dollar question, all right.
Yeah.
We've talked about some possibilities already. Cloud, mobile, the whole cybersecurity landscape with quantum computers on the horizon.
Right, but are there any other areas where you see Java playing a big part down the road?
One that's really fascinating to me is edge computing. As more and more stuff is connected to the internet, like smart homes, cars, everything, there's this growing need to process data closer to where it's coming from instead of sending it all the way to the cloud.
So instead of my smart fridge sending data to a server farm who knows where, it processes it right there in my kitchen.
Exactly. That's edge computing. It's about moving the computing power to the edge of the network, close to the devices.
Interesting. But where does Java fit in?
Well, remember how we talked about how Java can run practically anywhere? That's huge for edge computing because these devices, they can be all sorts of things from tiny sensors to powerful servers. Java can handle it all.
So it's like having this one tool that works for both the cloud and the edge. Very cool.
Right. And as edge computing gets bigger and bigger, Java is in a really good spot to be a major part of it.
Definitely sounds like it. Any other big trends you see Java impacting as it keeps evolving?
Data science and machine learning are two big ones. These fields are all about processing massive amounts of data and the speed improvements we've been talking about with Java. That makes it super appealing for those kinds of applications.
Right, because if you can analyze that data faster, you can do more with it, build better models, make better predictions, all that good stuff.
Precisely. So, as data science and machine learning keep growing, who knows? Maybe we'll see Java becoming even more important in those fields.
So many possibilities. It's exciting stuff. But, as we talk about all this potential, there's one thing I keep coming back to. We focused on how Java's changing to meet the needs of the tech world, but there's also the ethical side of things. We can't forget that.
Absolutely. As tech gets more and more powerful, we have to use it responsibly. That's non-negotiable.
Yeah, we were talking earlier about AI and machine learning, and those fields are advancing so quickly. We have to be so careful to use them ethically.
Couldn't agree more. As AI gets smarter, we need to make sure it's used fairly, that it doesn't make existing problems worse, like bias and things like that.
And we need to think about the jobs that might be lost as automation gets better. It's not just about writing code, it's about the impact that code has on people's lives.
Exactly. It's a responsibility for all of us, developers, tech companies, everyone.
Okay, so as we start to wrap up this deep dive, I think it's really important to remember that while the technical advancements are super cool, the biggest questions we face are often the ones that go beyond the code itself.
That's the truth. We have to ask ourselves how to use this power to make the world a better place, not just a more technologically advanced one.
Love that. But before we go, let's remind everyone where to find the articles we've been discussing today.
You got it. The first one's called JDK 24 and JDK 25, what we know so far. And the second is Paving the On-Ramp, both from InfoQ, and we'll link to them in the show notes.
Perfect. And with that, I think we're ready to wrap up this deep dive into Java. Expert speaker, it's been a pleasure having you with us today. Thanks for sharing your insights.
The pleasure was all mine.
And to you, our listener, thank you for joining us. We hope you found this informative and maybe even got you thinking a little bit about the bigger picture of technology and its impact. The future is being written right now, and we all have a role to play in shaping it. So until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep pushing those boundaries.
It's funny. We've spent all this time talking about the technical side of Java, the updates, the features, all that. But as we're wrapping up, what sticks with me is how much bigger Java is than just the code itself.
I agree 100%.
Huh.
Java is a tool, yeah, but it's a tool that's wielded by people, and ultimately it's people, not code, who decide whether technology is used for good or for bad.
It brings us right back to those big questions we were talking about, right? Like, how do we make sure all this progress actually benefits humanity? How do we use tech to make things fairer, more sustainable? Those are the things that really matter. And those aren't just questions for developers. Those are questions for everyone. We need to be having these conversations, figuring out the ethics of technology, making sure we're building the future we actually want, not just the future that's technically possible.
Exactly. It's not just about writing cool code or building the next big app. It's about understanding the impact our work has on the world and making sure it's a positive one.
And that's what I find so inspiring about the Java community, honestly. There's this real sense of responsibility, a desire to use this power for good, to make a difference.
I love that. And that's a message I hope everyone listening takes to heart. As you learn about technology, remember, you have a voice in how it gets used. Ask those tough questions. Challenge the status quo. Use what you know to make the world a better place.
Well said. This has been a fantastic conversation. I really enjoyed it. Hopefully everyone listening found it interesting too and maybe got a little inspired. The future of tech isn't set in stone. It's built by the choices we make today. So go out there, explore, create, and make those choices count.
I couldn't have said it better myself. And with that, we're going to wrap up this Java deep dive. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Until next time, keep learning, keep asking those big questions, and keep pushing the limits of what's possible.